good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming today. The survey results that we're going to, Professor Michael DeGaudier is going to present to you today, come from a survey that was undertaken immediately after the government announced their consultation into constitutional reform. So that was in December, and it ran in a little bit into January. And in January, we presented part of that survey to the media, which covered basically people's responses to the survey or the consultation, and also people's responses on Occupy Central. Now, the part that's going to be presented to you today covers attitudes towards C.Y. Leung, towards the government, and also it covers people's responses on various models for constitutional reform. And I think one of the important or unique things about the Hong Kong Transition Project surveys are the depth of analysis that is given to the responses. Most surveys usually deal with how they respond according to age, according to income, maybe according to occupation. But the Hong Kong Transition Survey goes further, and it examines how people respond according to their political inclinations. In other words, what political party they would broadly support. And it also covers how people respond based on how they characterize themselves as Chinese, as part of China. So I think those parts of the survey are very interesting, particularly the parts on how supporters of political parties respond, because that gives information to political parties as to how any course of action may be received by their voters, and therefore how they may fare at the next election depending on what proposals they may support or not support. Anyway, there's quite a lot of material to present to you, so let me hand over straight away to Michael DeGaudier. Michael, thanks.
Yeah. The page, anybody here came here in January to the little small 34-page report? Okay, I've got some sections of that. Basically what this does is this is the context of the reactions to Occupy Central and to the consultation. So once you see the overall context, I think you can understand some of the things that you've received in these very, very much reduced excerpts that you have on hand. Starting off first about the question about whether the system is working. The key thing I think to note here, and this is what I'm using in these overheads, these circles are exactly the same size on exactly the same height of placement. Okay? If you were to stick one in the middle here, in the middle, okay, you would have neither red nor blue. The blue would be totally out of the circle, okay, and the red would be totally out of the circle. So what we're talking about are rather dramatic shifts, both from what they were back in colonial times, because this starts off in 1991, 1993, way back there, very high level of satisfaction living in Hong Kong. As you can see, a deterioration of that right down to the point in 2003 and 2004 when we had the massive demonstrations. Does anybody here remember 2003, 2004? Were you guys there? Okay, you can, okay. Massive is the right word for that, okay? Huge demonstrations. And what we are, as you can see, at this point, there's been a rather steady trend after hitting a peak back in 2008. A steady trend now of deterioration of satisfaction with life in Hong Kong. And what we also have at this point is the highest level of dissatisfaction since the 2003-2004 period. When you break them down by groups, by age groups, for example, notice that the people under age 40 A majority of them are dissatisfied with life in Hong Kong. A majority, under 40. Anybody here over 40? Everybody's under 40. Okay, so this is you guys, all right? Your age. And what you also note here is these various occupations: managers, administrators, professionals, educators, associate professionals. These are all the folks that in our knowledge society are the key people, and majority, a clear majority of managers, administrators, professionals, educators are dissatisfied with life in Hong Kong, and also notice students. The majority of students are dissatisfied with life in Hong Kong. And so, again, this is now looking at the performance of the SAR government. Some very disturbing trends here. This is the key in 2002, 2003, and you'll notice that things were already building up in 2002 in terms of dissatisfaction with the performance of the government. The circle there that highlights that period starts off in 2002, runs up to 2003, okay, includes part of 2004, that's the height. This is the same height, same size, okay. A few years later, the red completely disappears, blue replaces it, okay. Here we are now. The red is at the bottom of the circle, but it's in the circle, all right. So basically what we're looking at are a series of developments in which there are ominous, dangerous patterns beginning to appear in terms of public opinion. You'll note also that under Dong Chi-hwa, there was never a majority of people satisfied with the performance of the SAR government. And with C.Y. Leung, it looks like we're in the same situation. We're not seeing a majority of people satisfied with the performance of the SAR government. When we break it down by age and by occupation, it becomes even more disturbing. If you look at the under 40s, look at the level of the under 40s. We're talking about 80% plus. 80% plus under 40. Now, the key thing about people under 40, as you guys know, you're better educated, you got more options. You don't have to stay in Hong Kong, you can go other places. You're young enough to handle that and get moving, all right? And you're a little more apt to get out into the street. And notice students, right at 90% dissatisfied. Now we look specifically at relations between the SAR government and the PRC government. All right, notice this again, 2004 period. 03 was not so bad, okay? Things deteriorated in terms of relations between the two governments when it became obvious that the central government was not pushing Dong Chi-hwa out. I mean, 2003 made it very clear that people wanted him to go. This is July 2003. He's still in office in July 2004, so you get an even bigger turnout in the 1st of July, March. And you get a rise in dissatisfaction because there was a feeling that the central government was making him stay. Here we are again. Same circle, same height, same size. All right? So clearly, already, before we have seen a big march. Before we have seen a big march. Now remember also when this was done right through Christmas. How many people are really angry at Christmas time? You guys running up to Chinese New Year? Okay? Sentiment is usually more positive this time of year. Look at it. Okay? This is why we're very concerned about the pattern that shows in our data, all through our data. Okay? 2004 was a peak of dissatisfaction when Tung did not leave. When he stepped down, you can see a huge rise, a relief rise. Okay? a leap in approval for the performance of the SAR government in relation to the PRC. Flip the other way around, PRC government dealing in SAR affairs. You can see only once have we seen dissatisfaction peaking over satisfaction. Back in 2004. But here it is again. Okay. Broken down by age and occupation, look at this pattern. Under 40s, again, highly dissatisfied. Over 80% of people under age 30 dissatisfied with the PRC's government's handling of SAR affairs. Associate professionals and students, particularly students, over 80% dissatisfied. Associate professionals, many of them are people who have to have various kinds of licenses and technical skills. Many of them go to self-funded programs or two-year programs, the associate professionals, in fact. This is according to the government's occupational categories, so you can get more details simply by looking at the census, how they define an associate professional. They're also usually younger. That's what it shows up in our data. And in terms of dealing with the PRC government in ruling China, satisfaction with the PRC government in ruling China, we have not had ever since the founding of the SAR, back in 1997, more people dissatisfied than satisfied, but we do now. The only time it even came close, right here, we just happened to be surveying right when the spy plane was knocked down by the Chinese fighter jet. And Hong Kong people got very, very concerned very fast that the central government was trying to provoke a war right off of Hong Kong shore, because you might remember that the American spy plane thought it was going to have to set down in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong bureaucrats were terrified that this might have happened. Instead it landed in Hainan Island, I think, was where the plane landed. Okay. And this was the only other time, and it didn't last long. They were very concerned about that. But now we have had a consistent rise and a significant pattern since 2010. So I think that the reforms in Hong Kong and the rule of China, you know, the central government, the CCP, has led a lot of reforms in China up until very, very recently, where it seems like the reforms have kind of bogged down and they've picked up in some areas, at least they're talking that way. But we have a level of dissatisfaction, over-satisfaction here that is literally unprecedented in the SAR's life before. Certainly, look how different it was in 2003, 2004. If we have a huge riot now, or a huge demonstration, I should say, the sentiment is very different. I think in 2003, Hong Kong people wanted to send a message to make sure Beijing knew that they were unhappy. In 2014, they know that Hong Kong people are unhappy. And again, under 40s, very high majorities, over 60%, over 70% of the folks under age 40. And again, these associate professionals and students show a distinctly higher pattern of dissatisfaction. When we start looking at this relationship between satisfaction with the PRC's rule of China by satisfaction with life in Hong Kong, you'll notice there's a fairly significant correlation across these. Now, if you had a perfect correlation, the line would be straight up and down. Everybody who was dissatisfied with the PRC government would also be dissatisfied with life in Hong Kong. That would be all red, all blue. Okay, so the line would be straight up and down. So the flatter it is, the less the correlation. The higher it is, the stronger the correlation. Okay, in other words, people react to one variable the same as they react to the other variable. That's what we mean by correlation, right? Okay? So this means that there is some association of satisfaction with life in Hong Kong and the rule of China. In other words, Hong Kong people are beginning to see Hong Kong as part of China. And the way things are in Hong Kong is because of the way things are in China. Okay? There's even stronger correlation of satisfaction with the PRC rule of China and satisfaction with the Hong Kong government performance. And see the angle of the line shifting? Okay? And what we're trying to do is get as much red and blue in the 4 squares. This is the average of the overall. But in these squares, you try to get the red and the blue balanced. Wherever that balance is where you put your line. Okay? So if this was all red, this was all blue, the line would be this way. Right? Everybody understand this? This is a simplified version of regression. Okay? So I don't have to go through the whole statistical stuff with you. Right? We get an even stronger correlation between PRC rule of China and satisfaction with the PRC's handling of SAR affairs. In other words, there's a very strong association in terms of people's satisfaction with PRC rule on how it handles the SAR. That's a key variable in affecting that other attitude toward the PRC government. In other words, if the PRC government is really worried about secession, okay, independence movements in Hong Kong, it holds the solution in its own hands. Okay? The only reason people are waving the British flag is because they're unhappy in how the government is running things. And the strongest of all, look how close the line is to getting straight up and down, dividing up. And it's actually a little bit, I should actually curve the line a little bit. It's not quite right here because the correlation is really, really strong. About satisfaction with the PRC rule of China and C.Y. Leung's performance. In other words, people in Hong Kong pretty clearly see C.Y. Leung not as the chief executive of Hong Kong, but as Beijing's chief executive in Hong Kong. Okay? Notice in terms of age, this is unprecedented numbers. Young people, and of course we started at age 18, and you guys know about scholarism and the folks that are age 17 and 16 and 15. I'm sure that those numbers are as high for the 18, 19, and 20, for the 15, 16, and 17, if not higher. Because it seems that the younger you are, the higher the dissatisfaction is. All right? Extreme dissatisfaction among professionals, educators. Look at the business sector. 70% of managers and administrators, which are mostly business dominated, dissatisfied with C.Y. Leung's performance. Over 90% of students. Okay? By which party represents? This is the DAB's view of things. This is the average of everybody. All right? So if you're wondering about how representative the DAB is, not very. Okay? They've got almost 80% who are satisfied. The overall sample shows that it's almost 70% who are dissatisfied. So it's almost the exact reverse of what everybody else feels. And remember, this number includes all of these. Take these out, and this is even higher. Okay? In other words, the contrast between the DAB and everybody who's not DAB is even bigger than what I'm showing you here. Fairness and the idea of fairness is all through this report. It's a crucial variable and people are very sensitive to it. There's a deep sense that policy making in Hong Kong is unfair, and that C.Y. Leung is part of that it's not representing it. We asked a series of questions about belief. How much, in this sense, it's kind of a way of doing trust. How much belief do you have? Notice that there's high levels of disbelief on implementing a fair system of nomination and direct election. High levels of disbelief about transparent and open consultations, and high levels of disbelief about making policies fair to everyone. These are dangerous beliefs if you're trying to talk about something as foundational as reform of our basic law, our Constitution. Right? This is what he faces. Notice it also again by age. We have extreme levels of disbelief under age 30. Almost no one under age 30 believes him more than just very little. And a majority of people under age 30 don't believe him a bit. None at all. None. Zero. Not at all. Now, why are so many people so dissatisfied and so disbelieving? What's going on here? Well, one of the things is that whenever you ask people about which problems they're most concerned about personally, this is an open-ended question. We don't have a closed-ended question here. It's open-ended. It's basically which problem of Hong Kong or in Hong Kong are you most concerned about personally? And what we found is in this latest survey, the highest level ever, and we just go back to 2004 here, so the previous 10 years. In the previous 10 years, you can see there was no time in which political issues, the competence of the chief executive, competence of the civil service, fair judiciary, autonomy of Hong Kong, freedom of the press, freedom of demonstration, freedom of travel, political stability. These are all political issues that have risen in concern, personal concern. Notice them also in terms of the follow-up question, are you satisfied with the performance of the government in dealing with your problem of greatest personal concern? Okay, and we have a few people who say that it's their problem that they're most concerned about is not something the government can do anything, and then don't knows. But then we have a very high level. Notice folks under 30, there's almost no one there who's satisfied. A majority are very dissatisfied with the government's performance, dealing with their greatest problem of concern, personal problem of concern. I think there's also an issue of hidden variables, intervening variables is a way to put it in social science. One of the things we ask about is about people contributing to their parents. I know I'm not supposed to ask journalists this, but anybody here give any of their money to their parents to help their parents or grandparents? Anybody here? I'm sure there are some here, all right. About half of folks in Hong Kong tell us that they are giving some part of their salary to their parents or grandparents. Okay? This is what I mean by grandparents. 12% of people over age 60 are giving money to their parents. In other words, we have retirees helping retirees. And then John Zhang, the financial secretary, comes out and says, we're going to have to cut support for aging. Aging is going to bankrupt Hong Kong. We have to raise taxes. We're going to have to do something. And so all these people who you can see here, under 60, this is the proportion who are giving something. So it's actually bigger than just this half for people under age 60. Okay, it's about 2/3. So there is a hidden burden, and it has an influence. When you look at, for example, dissatisfaction with life in Hong Kong, you can see those people who are giving none of their salary. In other words, there's not an extra burden on them, versus those who are giving a significant proportion, 20% and up. there's a big gap between the level of dissatisfaction with life in Hong Kong. This is a pressure point that's been put on. Okay? And what you also see, look what happens where the people who are dissatisfied with life in Hong Kong tend to go in terms of identifying a political party that best represents them. And those are the parties like the League of Social Democrats, the People's Power, the Labour Party, the Neo-Democrats, and various other factional groups that some people characterize as radical Democrats, radical opposition. In terms of identity, I think another thing that's contributing to some of this volatility that we're now seeing, this potential of people to get a little unhinged, if you want to put it that way. When we asked them about how they identified themselves, you'll notice back in 1997, going into 1997, there was a lot of fluctuation on this variable. In 2008, during the Olympics, we had a clear pattern of increasing identity as some variant of Chinese, either simply Chinese or Hong Kong Chinese. Okay. Later, we got this pink color coming in. People started spontaneously telling us Chinese Hong Konger. Okay. That they define themselves as a Chinese Hong Konger. It was a new form of identity. And you can also see that there's just huge fluctuation going on in the last few years on identity. I think what that indicates is that we have some real value conflict going on. And that's why we did some follow-up on this. What's also really interesting about this is notice one thing, the huge difference in Hong Kong person by generation. Under age 30, it's dominant. 30 to 59, it's the single largest. 60 to 88, it's about the smallest. But what's also interesting is this Chinese Hong Konger variable that seems to be across all age groups about the same size. This is a very interesting phenomenon developing. When we ask a follow-up question on this, what do you consider in terms of values? Which of these do you consider the most important to you personally to see protected and promoted? These are key terms, protected and promoted. About 2/3 say Hong Kong's identity as pluralistic, and international. And here is something that was pointed out by Anson Chan. There was no mention in the current consultation document of international standards or the pluralist nature of Hong Kong. Not a word. In 2010, there was in the document, but not this time. And so this is why we get about 2/3 of Hong Kong people, before the consultation even starts, already concerned at a fundamental level in terms of values and identity. Notice these variables are much higher. Hong Kong's identity as pluralist and international is much higher in people under 40. Now, in terms of looking at the context of which party people are picking now, notice that in 2010, going into the consultations in 2010, we had an increase in people saying a party represents them, and we also had fairly large blocks of parties. After the 2010, you guys know, the political parties shattered, they turned on each other, there was a lot of infighting, people got turned off from the parties. Now we're beginning to get a consolidation. Okay, but nevertheless, I mean, we're back to the same level of people identifying a party as representing them. It is more diverse than before. This may make it tougher to reach a consensus. Notice also from last year to this year, we went from less than half identifying a party. This is 2013, a year ago, and this is now. And what's interesting is while this, the DABFTU has increased somewhat, the pro-democracy parties have increased substantially past the half point. By age group, it's even more significant. Notice the folks under 30, people in their teens and 20s. They are attracted to parties like the LSD, People Power, Labor Party, various factional groups. In other words, the groups that are explicitly anti-compromise, which is why we can call them radical. And they dominate. They're the single largest grouping in the teens, people in the teens. In terms of occupation, notice that students is the single largest group among students by these parties. Okay. The brown is New People Party, Liberal Party. Right? Everybody understands the gradations. And in terms of personal identity, the people who say that they see themselves as a Hong Kong person, and remember that's much stronger among younger people as well, there's a very significant presence of these so-called radical parties. Civic Party, some parts of the Civic Party are just as radical as People Power, LSD. You guys probably already know that. Now, if you start playing with statistics and look at these results, and you start converting them from in the census to numbers, what we get is about 250,000 people under age 40 who look to People Power, League of Social Democrats, Neo-Democrats, Labor Party, hardline Civic Party. But what we also have is about an equal proportion who are equally dissatisfied, who say no party best represents them. No party controls them. No party influences them. So if long hair came out and said something, they might not be satisfied. Even if long hair said, this is a good deal, we should accept it. But they're equally as dissatisfied across all these variables. This is a troubling thing, okay? And it's more troubling in light of the following data, which you'll see in just a moment. Let's take a look at how people think about what they want in terms of systemic change. What's really clear is we have hit a new peak of support for directly electing the chief executive. It's the highest ever. It's right at 90% who support electing the chief executive. You know, it's hard to get 90% of people who say they love their mother. Okay, 90% is an unbelievable number in public opinion. Once you get to 90%, that's an overwhelming consensus, okay? And notice the strongly support is also a new peak. It's approaching a majority who strongly support it. Direct election of all EDGCO members. Again, we hit a new peak of strongly support. The peak hit last year is still there, over 80% who support directly electing all EDGCO members. And now 40% who strongly support it. And that's also deeply affected by age as well. Look at the group under 40. It's even higher than 90% those in their 20s and 30s. And look at this level of support among the administrators, the professionals, and the students. So here's a summary table on the various options. We'll go into those just a little bit. All right? Now, you'll notice that about 2/3 oppose simply making the current election committee into the nomination committee without any changes. Now, the DAB and FTU came out with proposals that actually made changes, but made it tougher. Okay? They made it worse. I guarantee you that if C.Y. Leung came out with the DAB proposal as the government's proposal, you would have the largest demonstrations that Hong Kong has seen since 1989. They would be enormous, and people would be very angry. And it would be a lot of young people who were very angry about this, not old people. Notice that now simply abolishing all the FCs has massive support, almost 80%. Just get rid of them all altogether, as you'll see. Or at least reform them dramatically. 80% support. Okay? And going variable by variable, you can see the trend. Keeping it the same, a dramatic increase in opposition between last year and this year. By age groups, it's overwhelming under age 30. Okay. Breaking it down by occupation, notice managers and administrators, these are the folks who have a lot of representation, and the professionals. This is enormous proportions of them who oppose this idea. These are the people who have the most influence in the current election committee. In other words, these are the people who have the most to lose by changes in terms of influence. But they do not want it kept the same, they want it changed. And they certainly don't want it made worse, like the DAB proposes to do. Now, again, notice the difference between the people who say the DAB represents them. They have a tiny proportion who are opposed. And this is whenever they're put all together with the average of everybody else. Once again, you take them out, and they're even more unrepresentative. Okay? So the DAB proposal is wildly unrepresentative of Hong Kong views. And I think this is absolutely critical for everybody to understand, because the central government should know that if they listen to the DAB, they're listening to a minority that is just as, quote, out of touch or more out of touch than Raymond Wong. Okay? We're talking about extremists here. The DAB proposal is fairly characterized as an extreme proposal. And it's an extremist proposal. It does not represent the majority, or even close to a majority. Abolish them and keep them for the nominating committee. You'll notice that opposition has strengthened. It's about the same size, but the intensity has gone up. And particularly among students, professionals, and managers and administrators. Okay, abolish them for LegCo, keep them for the seat. Keep them, right? Abolish only the 30 small seats. Keep the others. Do something and keep FCs as some form here. Again, intensity has gone up. Opposition has gone up a little bit. Abolish them in all forms for all purposes. And here you get a clear majority that's stuck there. A lot of support for this idea. Abolish them completely. And especially look at under age 40, 70% plus. Replacing them with 30 more seats, elected like the 5 DC seats at large. Sports down a little bit. What's interesting is that young people under 30 tend to support this more than other age groups. This I found very interesting. I think this goes to the fairness idea. Replacing them by which party represents best. What's interesting about this is that every single party, every group of people who say a party represents them, a majority shows support for this idea. So if you were looking for a compromise that every single group, their supporters could agree to, here's one. All right, so I'm not saying abolish everything, do all this stuff, or else we're going to have riots in the streets. What I'm saying is that there are ways forward. There's no need to be as radical and extremist as the DAB. There are roots of agreement here that show up in our survey data. Even those who say no party represents them, a majority. Now, the red line is the 50%. What about doing it this way? Having half the traditional FCs replaced with elected like the GC seats, first past the post, and half proportional, like we do now. This support has gone up to this. We now have a majority in support of this from a year ago. We like this idea. And if you do it by which party represents best, here we are again. A majority of every single group, even the DAB supporters, who are unrepresented otherwise, support this idea. So again, here's another way forward, away from confrontation. What about even doing this, where you basically try to take the 260,000 people or so and try to at least make the seats a little more equal, instead of 156 bankers electing a legislator and 85,000 teachers electing a legislator, at least try to even the numbers out, okay, among them, and get rid of this corporate voting, which is really, you know, everybody talks about how this hands the big tycoons hundreds of votes in these seats. Well, we find that while there's support for this, it's not as strong as for some of the other alternatives, but it's there. Excuse me, this is the one that equalizes with all the constituencies. This is the one that's equal to the 260,000. I'll get it right. This is the one that equalizes the FCs with the GCs, so that every constituency represents an equal number. This is the one that takes the number that's there now and tries to equalize it out. This is the one that is dropped in support. And there's not even a majority in any party, including the DAB, for this one. In other words, people want the FCs expanded in franchise. And they want the seats equalized. That's this. This is the other one. Straight here. Now, what happens if nothing changes, or if something as crazy as the DAB proposal gets in? It's unfair. What's really troubling about this is we ask a variant, each of these things is a measure of more or less formalized ways of political participation. Okay? So donating to a political party is an established group. No matter what their stance is, they play within the game, the rules. Signing a petition, attending a protest, attending a meeting of a political party or political group, attending a meeting of a kaifong, contacting the media, okay, OurTV.hk, calling you guys up, sending you a letter, contacting a district council member, contacting a functional elected member or a directly elected member of LegCo, or contacting a government department to seek help or express concern. All right? So these are the structural forms. Now notice this pattern. In 2002, before 2003, participation dropped off. In other words, what was clear in 2003 is that people's belief that the formal means of expressing a view on policy was breaking down. People were losing their trust that it made any difference, that the government was listening, that these ways worked. Now compare it to what's going on this year. And what's really interesting, this is the proportion who had attended a protest in 2002. Of course, this is in 2003. This is in 2002. If we took the protest down to that same level now, this would be even lower than it was in 2002. In other words, the breakdown of belief in the formal processes, except for protesting, is even lower than it was in 2002. So it's like a typhoon. You guys know about typhoons. Just before a typhoon strikes, the sun's out, the wind's down, it's beautiful, everybody wants to go to the beach, you know, and then all hell breaks loose. This is exactly what happened between 2002 and 2003. All right. Now this is the context of what we released to you in January about Occupy Central. This is the context. This question was asked same time. You can now see how every other variable starts lining up now. All right? So this is where we ask this question about, do you support it or oppose it? Okay, and you find that only 8% have never heard of it, which is astonishing. We're talking 92% of people had a view about something that had not happened. Take the don't knows out, and it's clearly 41% support, oppose 59. A lot of people are against it, but 41% of people support it. Take 41% of the number of people in Hong Kong who are age 18 or over. Do the math. That's a lot of people. These people are younger, they're better educated, they have strong values about pluralism and internationalism, and they're very dissatisfied. By occupation, you can see students' support is 2/3. You guys know about the history of Asian protest and revolutions. Most of the time, students are at the forefront. Same thing as in 1989. And they're supported by managers, administrators, and professionals at very high levels. By age group, 60% or more under age 30. So majorities are there, even though it's only 40% overall. By education level, it goes straight up, step by step. We have a majority, a strong majority of people who are graduates, postgraduates. Now, so what happens if various things were proposed? What happens if the government finishes the consultation and issues a report? You find that most people want to know what's in the report. It goes to 22% don't know. Support drops to 21% instead of 41%. So people want to know what's in the report. That means people are going to pay attention to the report. What the government comes out with is going to be a crystallizing event. So support drops, oppose drops less, don't knows increase. Respondents want to see the details. This is going to be a really important event in Hong Kong. If the pan-democratic parties react to that by calling for support of Occupy Central, support goes back up, almost where it was, statistically the same, plus or minus 3, if they stay together. Right? If they split, it drops substantially. It's 63% opposed instead of 59. Statistically above, 4 points up. 10 points difference in terms of support if they split. Now, what if the Beijing government starts telling people not to join Occupy Central like they've been doing the last few weeks? It turns into 53-43 versus 59-41. In other words, more people support, fewer people oppose. There's a huge shift, a 10-point drop in opposition, a 12-point rise in support, a total of a 22-point shift in public opinion. This is dramatic. All right. So people really want reform settled here, and they want fair responses that protects these key values. I think it was very interesting that C.Y. Leung came out the other day talking after the report about journalists losing and the public losing faith in the freedom of the media, that he started talking about pluralism and international standards. That's exactly the language he needs to be using, but he needs to be using it every day between now and the time the government releases the report. People seemed a clear majority opposing splits. They oppose Beijing. Will they act if they must? This is the question about worry now, and this puts it all in the context. All of the stuff you've seen before, now you can see why people responded about worry and why students were the highest of all, who said they were worried about violence. Okay? More males are worried. This is very unusual. Students extremely worried, 3 out of 4. Students are worried because they know how their fellow students feel, and they know how they feel in terms of dissatisfaction. And this is where now the identity thing fits in. Why you can see that the worry is highest among people who have this identity of Hong Kong's identity as pluralist and international standards, international. And by age, you can see folks under 40, again, a very strong majority, particularly worried. But those who are most supportive of Occupy Central are the most worried. Those who are the most worried are the most supportive. In other words, they fear that there's going to be violence, but nevertheless they are willing to stand up because of all these other factors that you just were briefed on. All right, so in conclusion, the most likely people to participate are the most educated, the youngest people. They are worried about violence, but they're still supportive of Occupy Central if they must do it. 1/4 to 1/3 or more still express support. That's 1 million people plus. 1 million people plus. So I think it's very, very clear that the government needs to pay attention to, in this consultation, about these issues of fairness. And I believe that people are committed to a confrontation if they feel it's necessary, despite worry about what effect it's going to have. So I think it's very, very important from the total of these results for both the central government and the local government and big business to understand that the entire generation under 40 has very high levels of dissatisfaction and stress. It's focused on not just the chief executive this time, but also on the central government, and they clearly support not a march, but a protest that's designed to shut down Central. This is an escalation of 2003-2004. All right.
Thanks very much, Michael. Now, if anyone would like to ask questions, please go ahead.
Which question? There were 5 variants. Which variant?
As I search new publish
Yeah. Are you? Yeah. You quoting from my survey?
it should be yours.
Yeah. But is this a media report or is this from the actual survey?
It's from media.
Media report. Yeah. Media often gets it wrong.
So,
It depends on which question you're asking and which age group you're talking about. Okay. So things get garbled. This is, once you take the dump nose out, it's 41.59. And this same slide was used in January. Same slide, no change.
Okay. So it's the result from all
Okay.
that in January.
Yeah, yeah, same one. It's exact same slide. That's what I was talking about, putting it in context. I took a few slides out of January, and then everything else was built out of that. So this is exactly what I said in January, plus these various breakdowns, okay, and then reactions, okay, to various options. Okay, Ford comes out, Democrats break up, Beijing says, don't do this or else. Okay, you get very different. It affects people's. So what we're talking about here is all of this data shows that Hong Kong people are paying a huge amount of attention to what's going on, and they will react to what the government decides to do. And the key thing is, if they do something that's unrepresentative, I think, frankly speaking, it's stupid, as adopting the DAB proposal, they would have massive, massive negative reaction. It absolutely guaranteed, and I will take anybody's bet in virtually any amount they want to lay down, okay, that this is what would happen.
And the consequences will be more serious than the.
Then in 2003, yes, because this time they're focused on the central government as the bad guy, not Leung.
Can you compare it to the 1989 June 4th?
Because students led 1989. Students were in the forefront. Tiananmen was an occupation. It was Occupy Tiananmen. They're talking about occupying Central, and I know that people like many Prime and others want it to be peaceful, but people in their teens are not known for their judicious behavior. Okay, and I'm speaking as a person who has raised children. And teenage boys are not people who tend to think deeply about what they're doing. The key thing is they react. And when you look at values, emotions, identity, dissatisfaction, we have all these variables together are like looking at the variables that you can see before a big forest fire. If it's been a while, like 10 years since a big forest fire, and you can see all of this various factors, like young people being highly dissatisfied, feeling that things are very unfair. It's like, tinder building up in a forest, and then the temperature going up, and then the wind going up, and all it takes is one spark and the whole place goes up. It's exactly what we're looking at in terms of public opinion. And remember, again, this is between Christmas, around Christmas, and just before Chinese New Year, when people normally are feeling better about things.
So you mean the sentiment are underestimated?
That's what I think.
But have you touched on why the people don't believe in CY? Is that touched on in your survey?
Well, we just know that they do. And I think that there's some strong indications there. For example, if you've got 2/3 of people believing in pluralism and internationalism, and they never hear anything from them about this until you get a survey that basically says people are losing belief in the media. Okay. You have to remember that scholarism exploded as a movement when people felt that education was being changed from education to propaganda. And it exploded. If people feel that the media is going from being an avenue that tells you what's actually going on, reporting the facts fairly, to becoming a propaganda tool, okay, that's a very dangerous situation. Okay, because the bad thing about reading a newspaper in a situation where you cannot rely on it to tell facts is that you get less and less familiar with what the facts are, and you can make mistakes. So, for example, you might believe that the DAB proposal is well supported, and you would be absolutely wrong, and that's when things blow up. And it's in the government's own interest, as many people all the way back to Thomas Jefferson said. it's in the government's own interest to have an unintimidated press in public. It helps them not do stupid things, dangerous things, destructive things. It's like a businessman refusing to do market research, only wanting to have research done that proves that their products were the best and everybody loved them. How long would that last? You might end up like Atari. Didn't they go out of business? Xerox? Anybody ever heard of Xerox? Ever heard of Xerox? They're out of business. Okay. You don't do market research, you're the idiot.
Or you don't listen to market research.
What's that?
Or you don't listen to market
Or if you
research.
don't listen to market research, that's right. Market research is very important to be done in such a way that you get the truth.
Professor, can you say a bit more on why do you expect teenagers will spearhead scale protests than 2003 if
Because almost every question shows that it's people in their teens and 20s that are the most dissatisfied with virtually every question you ask.
But if you look at your slides for the question what would they do if nothing changes or changes in fact, that one, the protest, the option of a protest is quite similar to the pattern of before a few years before.
Yeah.
So
You mean in terms of participation? Is that the one you're referring to? Which?
this one. For those,
Yeah, that's participation. That's people who told us they have participated in the previous 12 months.
Yeah, but the patterns, but the result on protests is quite similar to past few years.
Yeah.
So why do you think this time would be a very large scale?
Well, if you keep protesting and keep protesting and protesting and nothing changes, or the exact opposite of what you're protesting about happens, what do? Do you do another protest?
Is there a parallel here with national education? Students basically also drove that.
But I think what he's saying is if people are participating in protest, why would they change their participation rate in protest? Why expect an increase in the rate of protest? I don't think they see Occupy Central as a protest. Occupy Central is a confrontation. It's not a protest. It's not a march. Okay? It's meant basically to burn something down. Okay? It's not meant to send a message. It's meant to hurt somebody. It's meant to hurt big business, hurt government by closing down Central. Okay? That's not a protest. Not the way I see it. You know, going on a march is one thing. Sitting down in the middle of Gloucester Road,
It's not a protest. Occupy Central is not a protest.
it's an act of civil disobedience. It's deliberately to get arrested, but to get arrested doing something that by law you're not supposed to do. And it's arrested doing something that's intended to stop business, to stop traffic, to stop people moving around. It's intended to stop Hong Kong. It's intended to give Hong Kong a heart attack. Okay, that's very different from the July 1st march, where you're just, walking down and everybody's in a pretty decent mood. People like Robert Chung are counting. This is totally different. Okay. Occupy Central also. What you hear from Vinny Tai is what they want to do, what they plan to do, and what they're training people to do peacefully. But remember, these results also show a block of people, same age, just as dissatisfied, who do not listen to parties. They say no party represents them. These people are not getting trained. Okay? So no matter what Vinny wants to happen, it may not be what actually happens.
that might not be as useful.
I'm highly doubtful that it would be peaceful. And depending on what the proposal is, if it's a reasonable proposal and you have a small group of people who are rejectionists, you'll have a vast majority of people in Hong Kong support just simply arresting them. But if the government makes a completely unreasonable proposal, says we're going to make it impossible for there to be an election with real jobs, a Democrat will never get elected. We're going to give everybody votes exactly like the NPC, and a majority has to approve before you even become a candidate. In other words, the DAB proposal, I guarantee you there will be trouble. Big trouble. And it's not that I'm so opposing the DAB. I think it completely reflects what the DAB supporters feel. What I'm saying is that it completely does not reflect how everybody else feels. Okay, it is dangerously out of touch. So listening to the DAB would be like a business listening to the market research that was only positive. It would be dangerous and foolish in the extreme to do so.
So with the consultation closing very, very soon,
Third,
what is the best thing that the government can do if they want to mitigate these sort of?
well, I mean, there's many different things that can be done. There's things you can do to address fundamental factors. And there's things that you can do to address the consultation process itself. All right. Let's start with the process itself. With the process itself, one of the things that occurred is going to be done is that after they get all the results in and they look them over, then they're going to go back and try to see if there's any common ground. Okay. Like we just pointed out, there are some things that everybody could agree on. Okay. There are ways forward, I think. If the government actually, instead of issuing a report, tries to work out some sort of agreement, and then make that as part of the report and recommendation, that might be one way forward, which would make a lot of sense. Another way of dealing with just a report would be to say, this is just a report, and I would turn it over to an independent group to assess all of the various proposals that came in, to give a fair report on all of them, with no recommendations coming out of it. And the government basically saying, this is what an independent group analyzing the results that everybody has turned in on this consultation says people have said. Okay. In terms of whether or not that reflects a group, at least you might say that it narrows it down, just like the decision that the Law Society said about, civic nomination. People basically say, yeah, it's some other way of doing it, some sort of petition or recommendation, civil recommendation might be a way forward. That's dealing with the consultation itself. Other than fundamental factors like the intervening variable of young people who are carrying the, Hong Kong society is increasingly aging and is aging very fast. We have the oldest living society now in the world in terms of living. It's in the 80s. Unlike many other societies, like Singapore, older people, most of them, have no assets to give to younger people. Younger people, old people are all burdened, no hope. In many countries, including Singapore, UK, US, Canada, older folks own their homes. When they die, younger folks get a bequest, they get a legacy. They get some sort of means of helping them buy a home or get a home or get married, okay? I think we should look very closely at what Singapore did, which is basic, and what China has done, which is turn over the public housing stock to the people who live there. Okay. Particularly if they're poor and older, particularly in that case. And privatize that. That would increase also the supply of housing. Secondly, a thing that could be done, it's what I call family-friendly policy, of a combination of subsidies and tax breaks for families either that try to move closer together. One of the problems we have in Hong Kong now is because of the housing issue, you have people of one generation living in one place. Their parents live over here, his parents live over here, and her parents live over there, their children go to school there, he works over there, and she works way over there, and they're all trying to take care of their elderly parents as they're getting older, and their children, and their jobs, and their own. Okay, so we have huge burdens and costs, travel costs. Okay? So if we could have a family-friendly policy of pulling families together, either co-location or near location, okay? So you can cut down the burdens of travel cost and care cost and time. And you can do it, for example, by families that were moving in together, actually co-locating in the same household. You would need a larger house. In Hong Kong now, we have higher tax on larger houses. But if they're moving in with cross generations, then there should be no tax. There should actually be a subsidy for that. Because then you can have families taking care of families, and grandparents taking care of children. Okay? And this would lower the burden on families and on the government, and on our taxpayers, okay? And help reduce some of those things that are stressing families and younger people because they feel increasingly hopeless. They'll never make enough money. You have to realize that if you look at the census data, it shows that people in their 20s and 30s have not seen a rise in their average salaries for over 10 years. It's actually decreased about $1,000 a month over the last 2 years. That's census data. That's not my data. That's the census data. Okay, and this is the kind of stressors that make people very dissatisfied with government. And nobody is talking about this, which means that their problems, many of which are problems they're concerned about, housing, for example, they feel like nobody cares, nobody's listening, nobody represents them. How are you going to get attention? Nothing like turning over stuff, burning it down, sitting in the street, throwing rocks. Okay? That's the traditional way that disaffected groups in society have expressed their disaffection. And we have a large group of disaffected, alienated, dissatisfied, stressed young people who have no belief that anybody is listening. This is a dangerous situation. So when I use Tiananmen, I'm not speaking in inflammatory terms. I'm speaking in terms of warning. And I think the data fully supports that.
This is Amelia. What is your opinion over the Hong Kong Bar Association yesterday idea they reject the conflict nomination? What is your opinion about that?
I mean, there's number one, I'm not a lawyer. So if the lawyers come out and say that it's not within the basic law, they're probably right. Okay, lawyers tend to be pretty good at interpreting constitutional documents. Okay? And I have to, my son's a lawyer, by the way. My sister-in-law's a lawyer. So when it comes to law, I have views, but nothing weighty. However, in the Chinese Constitution, you have a right to petition. In the Chinese Constitution. So I think that the 18 scholars, who came up with this idea of a civil, what's the term they use? Recommendation, or a petition. How can you say you can't do that? Chinese citizens have the right. Isn't Hong Kong part of China? How can you say Hong Kongers can't have that right? So I think in terms of some sort of petitioning process or recommendation process, if the government wanted to formalize it more, I don't see how the basic law could forbid. In other words, I always thought that one country, two systems meant that Hong Kongers had greater freedoms than the folks in China. How can we turn around and say, no, that means they have, in this case, less freedom? Sorry, but that doesn't even make sense to me. So Bar Association may be right in terms of the process that was being proposed. They're probably right. But in terms of the idea that there should be some public input into the nomination, I don't see how they can say that there could be no public input into it.
I don't think they did.
Yeah, Bar Association didn't say that. And I don't think, you know, this is why I think the DAB proposal is so crazy, so extreme. Because it's hugely much more restrictive than even, you know, Chinese citizens in mainland China have. You could at least deliver a petition. They have to accept it. The DAB proposal has nothing like that there. You know, it's just crazy. Yeah, FTU, same thing. But they reflect their members. But you know, again, how far off of the rest of Hong Kong can you be to say that Hong Kong people have less freedoms than people in the mainland? And that is somehow what you mean by one country, two systems. I don't get that at all. That's beyond. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. So asking me as a scholar to try to make sense of it, I'm sorry, I can't. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Any more questions? Thank you, Lionel. Thanks very much indeed.
Yeah, it's a massive amount of data.
Jeff, will we
We'll
look
have
at
a
it?
new report.
Email out?
Well, we're going to be putting it up. It'll be on your website.
Yeah, through the website.
And it'll be up on the hktp.org website. And so will these.
You noticed it, guys. Does that mean you like to read it?
Yeah, it's very, very long. Yeah, but there's a lot of other stuff in here. There's stuff we didn't cover, of course. You know, people get right up the boat on overseas, you know, which is they're very concerned too. It's a very sobering report. Okay. It's very sobering to me, very disturbing. I find this, you know, nobody who loves Hong Kong would want to see something awful that could happen if we're not careful.